Thank you guys for tuning into our last episode of our newest mini-series, which is all about taste. This week, we are going to be talking about everything brewing method and how that affects taste. We're going to be talking about filters, grinder settings, we're talking about immersion versus pour overs, we're going to be talking about different brewing methods, water temperature. We're going to talk about it all. Now, for this next mini-series that we have coming up, guys, in a week or two, we want to hear from you in the comment section below. Do you guys want to do a mini series just about brewing methods? We're going to take a deep dive into different individual pieces of that, whether it be grind setting, filters, or anything. Or would you guys rather hear about the experimental processing methods in coffee and where I think the coffee industry is headed here in the future? So let me know down below in the comment section. I would love to hear from you, but let's get into it. So this week, we are going to be talking about everything brewing method. We sent you guys an Ethiopia Yirgacheffe Natural. So before we get into everything brewing, I want to talk a little bit about our coffee, the farmers, the processing methods, and all of that. So it is a Blue Awash coffee. It is from the Blue Awash region in the Yirgacheffe or Yirgacheffe. It can be pronounced either way. In Ethiopia. It is a natural processed coffee, so it is laid out on raised beds for a period of time and allowed to sun dry. They turn and rotate the cherries as they sit with the coffee bean on top of them regularly for 10 to 14 days, I believe. So the Awash region, or the Awash River in that region, is incredibly important to the farmers and the processing methods because that river provides an essential function and water source for the farmers, for the communities. And so this coffee is not as high of a grade as we typically get, but still really incredible, really tasty, natural process Ethiopia. It's going to be fruit forward. It's going to have some really good tangerine notes. It's going to have some really good cherry notes. And it's also going to have a lot of that cane sugar sweetness. And it's going to be a more complex coffee. So going back to last week's, all about acidity, has more of that cleansing acidic notes. And so it is a really just awesome coffee. I love it, and it's been one of my favorites that we've done recently, and I'm a big fan. So anyways, that's kind of a little bit about our farming, our processing methods, and where it all came from. It is a Yirgacheffe natural, and it is tasty. So this week, guys, we are going to talk about all things brewing method. We're going to talk about filters. We're going to talk about water temperature. We're going to talk about grinders. We're going to be talking about different brewing methods, and we are going to dive into it all. So first thing that I want to talk about is filters. So there are a lot of different kinds. The filters, I brought out just some of our brewing materials because I'd be embarrassed to show you guys everything because we have a lot more than what is here. So an AeroPress has a really, really fine filter that goes in here. It's paper or a really fine mesh. And because it is so fine, it takes out a lot of those oils that are found within the coffee. And so the finer your filter is going to be, the cleaner of a cup that you're going to get. You're going to be able to pull out a little bit more of those tasting notes easier in a really fine mesh filter. So Chemex is a perfect example of that. It's a really thick, really fine filter that pulls a lot of those oils out of it, which is why I personally really like, as opposed to doing a cupping, I do Chemexes of all of my coffees. So I had a mentor of mine, his name is Danielle, from Corvus originally. He now is with Cafe Imports, as well as doing some stuff with different roasting processing software. But anyways, he said, why do we do cuppings for coffee when our customers will never actually, you don't drink the way that you cup a coffee. So you're not going to pour hot water into it and then try to pull off the grounds and then drink that. It's disgusting. You're like drinking sludge. So he's like, why do we cup and taste for tasting notes and complexities and things that way if our customers will never try it that way? So he kind of changed my mind and perspective on that, and I totally agree with him. So we do Chemexes because it provides a lot of clarity because of how thick that filter is. So again, I kind of took a little rabbit trail going back to the main reason what we're talking about here is filters. A really thick, fine filter is going to provide a cleaner cup. You're going to be able to pull out a lot of those tasting notes because there's less oils and less body that you're going to find in that coffee. So on the other hand, you've got a really thick, or I guess I should say, yeah, I guess a thick is one way to define it, but it's not as fine of a mesh. It's there has a lot more room in between the mesh on your French presses. So the French presses, one is an immersion method, two has a lot coarser of a mesh as opposed to your AeroPress. And so because of that, a lot more of those oils are going to be found within your coffee. You're going to get a lot more body out of a French press. Same thing if you kind of look here, this would be one way that you could do a cold brew. So cold brew French presses, they're going to have a lot more body and richness that are going to be within the coffee. That's because those oils and compounds are going to be able to seep through that filter process into your coffee. So if you want a richer, creamier, heavier body coffee, go for a cold brew, go for a French press, go for a, I've even seen some of those cloth filters. Some people do pour overs with like a sock is basically what it looks like. It's going to be a lot less fine and a lot bigger grates within that filter, and that's going to get you a much richer coffee. On the other hand, we've got our Origami Dripper. For those of our tier 2 customers, we sell these on our website, so if you want one, you can go pick them up. For our tier 1, depending on when you joined us, we have gotten this in the mail. So this is a cool brewing method because you can do either a flat bottom or a cone for the filter. With that in mind, this is going to be more on that finer side of filters, and it's going to be a lot thinner. So Chemex, thick and really fine, thin, still fine. So with that being said, the thickness or thinness of your filter matters. So again, I've talked a lot about that grate, and really fine doesn't allow a lot of those oils to pass through. Really big grates allow those to pass through. Now we're going to be talking about thickness. So Chemexes have multiple layers of filters that lay on top of them. So you've got thin, and then you've got layers upon layers that water and coffee has to process through. A pour over, a V60, a flat bottom, Kalita Wave, those are going to be one layer, but they're going to be really thin, meshed. So with that, you're going to get a much more brighter, fruitier, poppier coffee. So if you want to pull out those notes, which the Ethiopia would be great to do that with, now it has some complexities, so you can play with it, but I would recommend a one layer single filtered cone or flat bottom filter because you're going to pull out a lot of that bright, citrusy, fruity notes. You're going to have a lot more of that sweetness and all that kind of stuff that goes into it. So that's what I would recommend for that specific coffee. So that's filters. We took a deep dive into that. Next thing I want to talk about is just kind of a basic, which is going to be the difference between pour over and immersion. So immersion, you grind your coffee, you dump it in this French press, you pour hot water on top of it, you set a timer for 4 minutes, you forget about it. Once that 4 minutes is up, you plunger down, you pour your coffee, you're off to the races, and you enjoy it. That's immersion because the coffee is immersed in the water for a set period of time. Going over here to a pour over method, Chemex, pour over method, Origami, pour over method, V60, it's just a big one. You can also do cold brew in, but beside the point, all these are pour overs. They're pour over because that's exactly what you're doing. You're pouring water over those grounds and it is then filtering through. That's the difference. It's not sitting in the water with the coffee, which would be an immersion. So that's immersion versus pour over. The next thing we want to talk about is grind settings and grinders. I cannot stress this enough. I always recommend for people, step 1, get really good coffee. You guys have already done that. You joined our subscription. Step 2, get a good grinder. Step 3, scale and ratios. So if you have done step 1 and you're trying to master like step 4, 5, and 6, which would be like, what should I do for the ratio for my pour overs versus AeroPresses? Or should I look at this cool brewing method? You don't have a good grinder, you're kind of skipping out on a lot of that stuff because you can change certain variables, but if the 1, good coffee, 2, good grinder, 3, good scale isn't there, it's kind of pointless. So get a good grinder, a good burr grinder. What I would recommend is the fellow Ode. One of our subscribers, Dan, shout out to you, just picked one up. He had a hilarious post about it kind of going south, but it's an awesome grinder. If you guys want one, I can pick you guys up one for cheaper than you can get online. So shoot me a DM or an email if you guys are interested in that. But a good grinder is key. Finer you grind your coffee, the more acidity, brightness, fruity notes you're going to get. The coarser, hence your French presses, the more bodied complexity you're going to get out of it, the more richer coffee. So that's all I'm going to say about grinders. The next thing that I want to kind of dive into and take a little bit of a rabbit trail is batch brewers. So there are a lot of different kinds of manual brewers as opposed to batch brewers. Personally, I love doing a manual brew, whether it be French, whether it be a pour over or immersion, when I have the time to. Let's be honest, a lot of us have kids, a lot of us have busy lives. You don't always get 10 uninterrupted minutes to get out your scale, grind your coffee, weigh it out, do the pour over, get the water heating. So a good batch brewer is what my wife and I drink regularly. They unfortunately don't make these anymore. You can still find some on eBay, I think. But a good batch brewer is huge. What you're looking for in a good batch brewer is a good spray head that is going to evenly disperse water over all of your grounds, because what you're doing on a manual is you're doing that dispersion of water yourself manually. A good batch brewer is doing that for you. So if you have one that's just dropping water in one spot of your coffee, that's not good. The reason that's not good is because you're going to over extract certain coffee grounds and under extract others. So if it's dropping just into the center of your brew basket, let me just do this. So it's dropping just into one part of your brew basket and nowhere else, the center is going to be over extracted, the outside is going to be under extracted. So this one does a pretty good job of it kind of sprigs out to get a little bit better coverage. Fetcos are really great. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, but Tecavorm, those are awesome as well. Bonavita has some really good ones out there. So those are some of those ones for batch brewers that I would recommend. This one just looks cool. That's why we got it. The other things, so we so far have covered filters, we've covered grinders, we've covered the difference between pour over versus immersion, we've covered batch brewers. The next thing is going to be scales and ratio. Like I said, number 1, good coffee. Number 2, good grinder. Number 3, good scale ratios. I can't stress this enough. I said this in my Thanksgiving video, if you guys were with us then. I can't tell you how many times I've had my own roasted coffee from other people that doesn't taste right. And I know for a fact it's because their ratios are off. So if your ratios are off, it's not going to matter how good your coffee is, how good your grinder is, because you're putting too much coffee to not enough water, or too much water to not enough coffee. So get a good scale. Ours is down in this cabinet, but anyways, I have a Kea, or again, all these crazy names are hard to pronounce, but it's the Pearl scale. It's white. It does time and it does time and weight. So for our level 1 subscribers, we sent out a coffee scale to you guys, which has both the weight and the time for it. That's huge, because I can tell you guys, hey, for a pour over, which is what I would recommend for this, whether it be flat bottom or cone, I would recommend a 1:16 ratio. Now, if you don't have a scale, that means nothing to you. You're going to do your tablespoons and eyeball it and hope for the best. A 1:16 ratio means for every 1 gram of coffee, you're going to have 16 grams of water. So you have 30 to 15, you can do the math better than me probably, but that's going to be your ratio. So when I say 1 to 16, I mean 1 gram of coffee, 16 grams of water. 1 ounce of coffee, 16 ounces of water. It's the same thing. 1 to 16, it is interchangeable because it's a ratio. So get a good scale, use the ratios that are recommended. You can find tons of recipes online. You can reach out to me, DM me on Instagram, email me, text me, however you guys want to reach out. I'm an open book always. There are ratios for all kinds of things. 1 to 12 to 1 to 15. A Chemex is 1 to 17-ish. The AeroPress is kind of in that 1 to 15 to 1 to, AeroPresses can be pretty different because there's a lot of ways to do AeroPresses. 1 to 14 to 1 to 16 for flat bottom to cone on the Origami Dripper. And then, we could go on and on. But ratios are super important because it is what's going to give you weak or strong coffee is another way to talk about it. Under extracted, over extracted, all that kind of stuff. So anyways, get a good scale, get ratios. That is my huge overarching deal about brewing methods. If you guys have questions, if you guys want to know what I would recommend for specific coffees, whether it be my coffee or a Kenya you got from down the street, does not matter. I will give you recommendations. I'll talk about all the nerding out of gear that we ever could if you guys reach out to me. So anyways, thank you guys so much for being a part of our story. Thank you for being a part of this mini-series and supporting our small local business. We'd love to hear from you and hope you guys have a wonderful week.